Good morning. It's 10 o'clock Friday, the 24th of July, and today Tsuut'ina Nation is having their annual celebration, which includes powwow, rodeo, hand game tournament, slow pitch tournament, and golf tournament. So we get people from all over Western Canada coming to our powwow, our celebration. And I sort of gave the gist of the history about the original start of the powwow, dealing with the ladies' auxiliary here in Tsuut'ina. Again, that's from my own perspective as an Indigenous female, as especially when you're like 12 and 15 years old. Anyway, it is so smoky out. You can hear it in my voice. I've been indoors most of the week. I went out a couple of days ago for about 5 hours, and this is the result of it. Again, this heat wave, approximately, well, average, I think, well, I shouldn't say average. You can Google it. About 20,000 people in Europe have died from heat exhaustion. Heat's, just the heat. So apparently the targeted age is people over 70, which I fall in that spectrum. So I have to really be cautious. And I've got like all the air purifiers, air conditioning, humidifier. Right now I've got a pot of water boiling so that whatever smoke is in my home has humidity, just so that I can breathe or not breathe in anything. And I opened up my patio door, which oversees the Rockies, and you can just smell the smoke. So be careful if you're in southern Alberta or any place where you can smell the smoke. It's dangerous, and the heat, like all week, it's going to be 30 above, which is like I think 36 or 38 is 100 Fahrenheit. So why am I doing a podcast? And again, maybe I'm just so bored because I've been housebound because of this smoke. I know, it's just like, give me a break. I love the winter because there's no smoke and it's cool, fresh air. I mean, people have got to sort of have the mindset of like, why does she like winter? Now, this whole stuff with forest fires, that just came out, in the past 10 years. So it's really something to see, especially when the whole concept of groundwater and how brittle our trees are becoming, because the majority of the people who drive cars live in urban areas, and they have a magic wand that, you just turn the magic wand and hot and cold water come out of it. So, that's all they know in terms of relationship to where water comes from. Anyway, this past couple of days, even with my podcast, I've had people call me just out of the blue about this whole lawsuit, and like even like I've noticed, when something newsworthy hits the social media platform, everybody who just wants to get on there and get some notoriety, and think that they can publish or do something to get some little more followers in their social media platforms. And that's okay. I mean, you're trying to spread the word of what's happening when really you don't know what the grassroots people have been going through. And even that too, sometimes for me, especially when it comes to gossip and people wanting to know my business, it isn't a sincere, how are you doing? There's nothing sincere about it, because all they want is information. And that's the same thing with social media. People, don't really care about the content. They just care about making sure somebody's listening to them, or they want to be seen or known as like the Indigenous authority. So let me start off. Well, a couple of weeks ago, a white friend of mine called, and she's trying to take care of herself. She's a divorcee. She has a 30-year-old son, educated, and we were talking because, we've been friends since the pandemic. And she was making a comment on her cholesterol. And she says, I eat everything. I eat vegetables, like I take care of everything. She says, but my cholesterol is skyrocketing. And I made a suggestion. I said, well, maybe stop drinking alcohol. I said, maybe stop drinking for 6 months. Now, the thing about it is like, and again, too, I don't like talking about the concept or the content of alcohol because everybody has their own opinion because people like to drink. But the reality of it is when you drink, that alcohol turns into sugar. Now, if you, like I've known people to say, well, I'm going to have something to drink, but I'm going to talk to you on the phone, so I'm not drinking alone. Okay, I don't know. Again, everybody everybody has a controversy when it comes to alcohol. Again, because people consume it. So studies show, and again too, I because I didn't grow up like seeing like my father when he drank, he didn't drink in the house because it was illegal to even have alcohol in homes in First Nations, Inuit and Métis communities. So a lot of my friends who are white, that's how they've grown up. Now, in the state of Utah, there's a high rate of alcoholism only because there's no, they don't allow drinking. I think in the Wasatch, Utah Valley, it's prohibited to sell alcohol, whereas outside, like in Salt Lake City and the surrounding areas, they can buy alcohol everywhere. But the high rate of alcoholism is because the the Mormons, the children have never seen their parents drinking, so they don't know what alcohol does or how to handle it. So, like, that's why there's a high rate of alcoholism amongst the Mormons. Even though people think, oh, well, that goes against the word of wisdom. Yeah, but that's the stereotype. You got to sort of look it over and say, okay, poo-poo it, put it aside. When I'm talking to my white friend, I said, maybe just, don't drink for 6 months. See what happens to your cholesterol. I said, because your central nervous system and how your body reacts to things that you eat is like, it's amazing. So apparently, if you keep on drinking like what you deem as sociable for years and you stop drinking, it doesn't take a month of detox because of the brain. The brain's like the sponge of the brain. It takes a whole year for the cells and the brain's chemistry to detox itself. I mean, it's like anesthetic. I don't like taking anesthetic because it stays in the human brain for 6 months. So a lot of these things in the blood barrier walls within the brain and hemispheres, especially how the brain communicates with the rest of the body in terms of metabolizing food, for example. So that was a suggestion I made to her, not to criticize her. I said, that could be if you've tried everything to maintain your cholesterol, try that. Like, because my father drank, I always tried to figure out, like what's the chemistry on that. So apparently, like when people drink so much, especially men, the skin has different layers of fat, and so when a man drinks a lot, that that extra that extra fat starts developing underneath the skin, and they become more feminized. So again, I'm just this is just my opinion, okay? Because I'm saying the physiology and what we consume really evolves. It's one thing you can say, okay, my mother carried me, it's the woman, but it's another thing when you become an adult and you're living your life, the only person you have to blame is yourself. So I guess for the men, I'd say suck it up, buttercup. If you have these feminine qualities, check to see if you've been like drinking way too much, that your body chemistry is changing. Like even like it's just feminizing. The body just sort of converts to its original state because in every mammal for the 2 weeks of life, everyone is female. So the psychology of it and how things sort of progress as we're outside of the mother's uterus and living. It's like we're basically mostly liquid and fluid. So how we take care of ourselves and how we manage ourselves, especially with men having a shorter lifespan than women. But again, too, what can you say? I have brothers, and trying to have them take care of themselves is ridiculous. Like, they just don't listen. So, like, I don't expect my male viewers to even, give me 2 cents of time from listening about my theories on alcohol. But one of the key things too with alcohol and drugs is like it's the umbrella, or how would I put, the curtain. So a lot of times the human condition, the psyche or the psychology of human development is masked with this curtain. So people can't see through the curtain because of this facade of alcohol and drug abuse and this whole nighttime partying and stuff like that, and even like all the stuff that comes with it that breaks up marriages and just does a lot of damage. So yes, alcohol is poison, but for somebody who drinks and has drank most of their life by the time they're 65, it does take a toll. I've seen it. I just like, for example, too. There's a lot of people who look older than me, even though they're maybe 10 years younger than me. And again, too, I think it has to do with the central nervous system and how much stress you put on yourself, or the environment puts on you. So anyway, that's the adult part of it. Most of the time, when I've talked about Nathan Chasing Horse, it's basically talking about child development. And for me, when we have submissive men, or men who want to be submissive because I think they call it, what is that word now? Oh, I asked somebody, pegging. The word is pegging. And so, like, I didn't understand, like, it's a man isn't homosexual or bisexual when they desire pegging. It's they want to experience a submissive role in the relationship, and sort of feel what a woman feels when she's in a submissive role when they're sexually active. And so it's not a indicator that somebody is homosexual or bisexual. It's just in the nature of the biology of men. Again, figure it out. 1 + 1 is 2. Where is the G spot? Where is it located, and why is it there? So this is a perfectly natural thing, or not thing. It's a perfectly natural biological process that a lot of men are experiencing as they age, because when you start off and nobody's talking about healthy human sexuality, you experiment, or you see pornography, or you go into the what do you call it, that Alice in Wonderland, where the rabbit takes you into this different world. And sometimes when you go down the rabbit hole, it's really difficult to find your way back out. So, for me, as an elder, as an Indigenous woman, I'm hoping that a lot of Indigenous females who are younger realize, like, they're in the rabbit hole, and hopefully through listening to my podcast, they can find their way out of that rabbit hole. But it has a lot to do with early childhood experiences and memory, and even the fact too. I think a lot of times, as human beings, we see people's energy, but we don't want to see it. Like, we sense it, but we don't want to sense it because we want to keep that person in that state of status, whatever that status that person has shifted his identity into. So, for example, when I went down to Las Vegas and I spoke with the followers of Nathan Chasing Horse, the ex-followers, sorry, I got to say that they broke away from his influence about 15 years ago. Like understand this. Nathan Chasing Horse he's 50. He's been functioning ever since he was, maybe 15, 16, 17. Because by the time I met him, he was 30. And from my understanding is like his maybe even 10 years prior when he was 20, or even like just the reality of what he was doing in recruiting children. Like we'll say even like Ren Leone and Melissa being the mother. When Melissa came here, she didn't bring Ren the first time. She just said that Nathan had said that Ren was a holy child and that he wanted to teach her all the rituals and ceremonies in a safe environment so she, when she became a woman, could be a medicine woman. Again, grooming. Now, I talked to one of the other women and she says, again, Nathan had victimized her child. And she says, well, that's how he groomed my daughter. In ceremony, he hit her on the head with a rattle, scared the bejesus out of her. Somehow he started becoming sexually aroused by these children being afraid of the spirits, like nightmares. And so I relayed the fact that my younger niece, like there was Roberta and then her younger sister, so there was an age, I think, like an age difference of 5 years. So my other niece had told me when they were in ceremony, Nathan would hit her on the head with a rattle, and of course, he's trying to scare her. But that kind of grooming and recruitment in seeing children when he comes into communities and latching on to the parent. So with Ren, it was with her mother Melissa. For Roberta and her younger sister, it was my brother that he latched on to. And in Fort Peck, there were older women who he latched on so he could get closer to their grandsons. So there's a whole structure of how he recruited people to follow him and to get to their children or grandchildren. Now, a lot of people, especially women who are mothers or even sexually, we're saying women who've already been sexually active, when they see Nathan, it was more of like an attraction, what do they call it? Infatuation. But then when they started realizing there was something the matter, they couldn't leave him because that attraction, that infatuation was actually limerence, which in itself you have to deal with a deep psychological attachment. Like I said, Nathan attached himself to parents and grandparents so he could get to their children, usually 8, 9, 10-year-olds. And if there were older siblings like my niece Roberta, then that's who he would exploit. So he tried to get his foothold into families this way. And the majority of people that I have met did see something queer about it, and did put their foot down and say, no, I don't want him to come into my home anymore. And others just accepted it and said, okay, teach me. And whatever they did, and I can't speak for women, I can only speak for my brother. He served time for the what he chose to do with Nathan. Now, I don't know other First Nations communities, but no doubt there were so many other men and women that he latched on to just so he could exploit their children. I think the underbelly of it all is that when he trafficked teenagers, that was another way of just getting money for his own addictions. So in Indian country, especially in Western Canada, when you have the Calgary Stampede and the history Indigenous women being trafficked, even Sacagawea or Pocahontas, all these women who've been trafficked. It's amazing that white men or men in terms of not Indigenous to the Americas are really interested and attracted to Indigenous women. For sexual pleasure, sexual curiosity, just like, oh, I put a feather in my hat, I slept with an Indigenous girl. I don't know for what reason, but I've been there. I'm not saying I'm innocent. I've been there. I mean, the fact too is like when I've talked to some Tsuut'ina women, like a couple of decades ago, and I was talking about who I was sexually active with. One of the young women says, "What? You were with who?" Like, the whole notion of an Indigenous woman being with a man other than Indigenous sometimes shocks people, but again too, it's the nature of systemic racism. The curiosity of what it must be like. I mean, it's the whole phenomena too with people chasing after different nationalities, like people chasing after athletic black men, or women chasing after athletic Indigenous men. I mean, cowboys and Indians. I mean, some of our Indian cowboys were just so gorgeous. Been there, done that. What can I say? I howled at the moon when I was younger. However, that being said, I had no education in human sexuality in terms of what I know now as an elder, and in terms of what I know in the sense of what it is to be a victim, and also too more so in denial that someone hurt you, because like I thought I was living a balanced life, didn't realize like there was a hidden agenda, subconscious fear or something. I don't know what it was, but until I went to court and actually faced my perpetrator, like the unconsciousness, or we'll call my central nervous system, it sort of kicked in, like I realized like I wasn't afraid anymore. And why was I afraid? I wasn't working in Tsuut'ina, so why would I be afraid to say anything? But yet again, there's that policy, established, I was 25, no woman 55 years and younger who was single and had no children could apply for housing. So again, that's misogyny, but yet single men with no children could get a house. So this colonial way of thinking and deconstructing oppression or hatred towards women is all built on this act called the Indian Act, which is very discriminatory. It's so discriminatory that even the police and people that aren't First Nations, if they start swearing and calling us down, you wagon burner, whatever. I mean, I grew up like a kid hearing that my entire life. But then when you hear it from somebody who says, "I want to bury you, you want to be 6 feet underground with your ancestors from Indian residential school," hate like that. The police won't do nothing. But yet, if that were the case for an immigrant who was being religiously persecuted, then it's a hate crime and it will go to court. So under the Indian Act, it's okay for people to think this way, because it's part of the whole network of the Indian agent and the federal government. So a lot of provincial people, a lot of politicians will just scapegoat and pass the buck. Oh no, it's a federal responsibility. Like all of this forest fires now, the premiers of the provinces are saying it's a federal responsibility. Really, it's been like that for forever. So it's not going to end. However, I do think when it comes to human development and just what's out there, that I do think non-Indigenous people really need to look at their own psychology, look at their own childhood upbringing. It's amazing too just how people in positions of power like judges, lawyers, mayors, premiers, presidents, like get away with so much child abuse, like Epstein files, just the trafficking of children. And yet the majority of white people, Europeans, will project all that onto minorities like Indigenous people, without them really like taking a really good look at their own culture, their own environment. So when I say like Nathan Chasing Horse was already recruiting and grooming people so he could have connection or close contact with children, that's like I said, by the time he was 30 and I met him, he had already been grooming teenagers. Now, this whole concept of grooming too, like it's like I said, even when in the 70s when I was in Utah and I saw these doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs in the National Congress of American Indians, and how they were exploiting these young women who were volunteering. And again, I'll say exploiting because, you know, again, if a person's promiscuous, it's not up to me to say thou shalt not. But apparently a lot of Republicans today are trying to put a lot of restrictions on the rights of women and the rights to how they choose to live and to have a say over their own body. So like I say, even during the Calgary Stampede, there's an influx of divorces, influx of human trafficking, what else? Marriage breakups, a high rate of sexually transmitted diseases rises, a high rate of abortions. So, like again, everybody's being human. This is a human condition. But for me, part of the podcast and my wanting to talk about sexual abuse, especially consent with children, teenagers, young adults, and the whole process of brain development, we're also looking at people on the spectrum, and we're looking at people who are FASE. Like we're looking at a population. Now the reality is like I said in the 60s, 70s, I was young, but I also saw how people were before alcohol and drugs. I also know too, like that hundreds of years ago, like I think 100 years in England, they all drank beer because of the shortage of water. Okay, now is that an excuse now for people to be drinking? What, BC banned all of the alcohol coming in from the United States? You know, I go into Las Vegas and there's alcohol everywhere. In the state of Utah, what they call it, Utah Valley, alcohol is restricted. But in the United States, they have alcohol everywhere. Whereas in Canada, it's not like that. Yes, we have our problems with alcohol and drugs. Why would Premier Danielle Smith want 11 recovery centers so she could privatize healthcare? What the hell? Has it worked in the United States? No. So, again, look at all these forest fires. You know, this has to do with water, the consumption of the oil sands, and even those data centers, like draining the water. Now, there should be a wake-up call because there's El Nino, and like, what, 20,000 Europeans have died since June from from the heat. And it's not going to get any better. This is the reality check. You know, there's 8 billion people in this world. How do we thin the population? Well, you just keep doing what you're doing. Keep driving your cars and keep exploiting poor people. And just keep on thinking you have a privileged life to do and act the way you want without any consequences of who you're hurting. So again, patriarchy. You have to understand too, even in England, like for that 100 years of them just drinking beer and ale because there was no water, no clean water. Like they were not that clean. Understand that, because when they came into the Americas, and that those millions of indigenous people that were killed because of the diseases brought in from Europe and all, anyway. What can I say? It's a problem that a society that deems themselves so religious, so Puritan, when they have had generations, at least 200 years before alcohol was even introduced to Indigenous people in the Americas. Understand, though, there's one generation earlier in the United States. In Canada, it was just in the 60s. That's not long ago. So a lot of the rhetoric, or like, oh, the only good Indian is a drunk Indian. That what do they say? The only good British person is a drunk British person. Because for 100 years, that's all they did was drink alcohol. So imagine how many generations of FAS children were born, not just in England, but you see it in Renaissance paintings. These people with distorted facial features because of FASE. And some people don't have those distorted features. And that's why when I talk about people not having critical thinking skills, it's not their fault, because people didn't realize what alcohol does to unborn, like a fetus growing in a woman's body, or even the semen in men, too. So a lot of, and again, as we're aging, brain development and the erosion of the capacity to have and maintain memory and boundaries, with the onset of Alzheimer's and dementia. So, all these things are all connected to our sexuality and how we function amongst each other, and how we develop our critical thinking skills in what is appropriate or inappropriate behavior. So, like I said, whatever problem was just the diagnosis, and I can't do that because I am not trained that way. But I do know that something like Nathan Chasing Horse was born this way, and however he recruited people, those people too had to have already had some sort of trauma, or had some sort of learning disability, or some reasoning why they couldn't actually see him for who he was. At the same time, the children and the teenagers that he recruited, like, he had total control over people who were in that circle with their children. So for me, it would be interesting to document exactly like how they debriefed these children that he had control over in Las Vegas. I mean, even the fact that you tried to talk to people or explain this to people, it took 20 years before Ren Leon wrote her social media post. Like, I mean, I got an email this a couple of days ago, and this woman's talking about, a sexual assault, and I'm going, you're not the victim. In my blog, I've always been clear that if you've been sexually assaulted, it's up to you to do the work. It's not up to you to get a friend to do it for you. It's not up to you to fabricate things because you don't have the skill set to counsel a woman who's actually been sexually assaulted. It's the victim, who is the sexual assault victim, that needs to do the work and find the courage to process it. That's why when this young woman from Sutana text me, I gave her as much information about what I went through and what she needed to do to protect her legal rights in exactly how Nathan Chasing Horse exploited her. And she did, bless her heart, she did. And the fact that there's no compensation for her in victim services is appalling. It's appalling that for decades leadership was cowering, or not cowering, cowering before Nathan Chasing Horse. Again, he liked instilling fear in people. Abracadabra, hit the rattle over somebody's head, and they're bejesus scared out of them, and they want to do better, like cancer scares. I mean, I think the majority of times he really manipulated people into believing they had cancer, or if they had cancer, like that something bad was going to happen. So again, how much fear-based decisions are made based on how afraid we are of things. It's like, for me, like I started off with this whole smoke situation. Yeah, I'm scared to go out. This voice I have right now is a result of being outside for 5 hours 2 days ago. If I go out, I'd probably die because the pollution is so bad. And that's the reality. That's a fact. But again, too, I like it bothers me in a sense that, like I'm sitting here by myself and I'm thinking, how like how diabolical. I mean, it's one thing that, I share my story, and then when I meet other people who are more closely attached to Nathan, I mean, I was only associated with him for a couple of months, but these other people had been associated with him since she was 14, the other when she was 3 years old, one 7 years old. They're like years and years of being around him. To me, for me, I'm just grateful that um, whatever and however I could help, just in saying that if you're a victim, it's up to you to do it. You can't rely on anybody else but yourself to do it, because people have a tendency to exaggerate. I'm not saying the lady who dropped the email on my YouTube is exaggerating. I'm just saying that all that these assumptions she's made can be ripped apart by a good lawyer. And that's why I caution people, if you're the victim, not the victim's friend, or even, uh, I just hope women are able to help other women instead of doing more harm to women because of just your assumptions. Ask questions, just come out and ask questions so you don't have assumptions of somebody because you're just assuming. That's not fair to the victim or the perpetrator. Because again, the the underbelly. I guess this is what I'm trying to say, is that the underbelly of Nathan Chasing Horse is far more dangerous than I ever could have imagined. It was one thing to know that he was grooming teenagers, like spending over $1,000 on my niece, like spending money, like making sure those two girls that he went with, he had, rich people, like Epstein had his own little entourage. All the same with Nathan Chasing Horse. They have not, they just dealt with the bare necessities with this guy. They didn't charge him with embezzlement, racketeering, or tax evasion. They didn't charge him with the FBI at a federal level. So understand that. This is so serious, but they didn't charge him with all that. And all those federal charges, all that other stuff, embezzlement, racketeering, and tax evasion, who helped him? They're not charging those people either. They just focused on him to get him life. And so he's serving life under the guise of sexual exploitation of teenagers. They're not even touching the base of him grooming children as young as 10 years old, or the network of trafficking, like private trafficking with leaderships throughout Indian country, or even the perversion of men who have an attitude towards women, and Nathan being right there just giggling away cheekily. There's a difference. There is a huge difference. Like in my community, we've had different men who've had over 10 children, different women having children, and again, it's a woman's choice and a man's choice. They don't need to be married; they just have children. So, what am I getting at? Okay, from my own experience, my own personal opinion, knowing men in general, if you take two men, both have 10 children, both have they're married, but they have extramarital affairs and they have children. What is the difference? Well, the one acknowledges his children and, will do everything to help out, not having any legal, maybe his wages are garnished because he's not paying child support, even though he's not married to the mother. But in most cases, the relationship or the agreement like this man has with the different women he's had children with. Now, let's just say you see it that way, but the underbelly of it all is one of these men is has a propensity for control and has become a serial rapist. Even though he's got all these children and all these women, he's a serial rapist and hates women. And women just flock to him because he hates women. I believe they love the way he treats them. Whereas the other man, he's not a rapist. He has all these children as well, and he's there for his children, and he's there for the women who had his children. But he's not a sexual deviant. He hasn't raped anybody, any woman, any child, nobody. So again, like I'm saying, I've seen it. I try to explain to people, how are people accountable for their children? Do they pay child support? How are they accountable to the children's mothers? Are they have a relationship with them? All that comes into play, especially when you live in a community where everybody knows each other. So when somebody is trying to say, oh, leadership is doing this and that, I'm going, they're adults. That's a decision they're making. If they choose to have different sexual partners and children, that's their business. But the problem is if there's something deviant, if they have a propensity for children, or they have a propensity for teenagers, or even just wanting to control women and become serial rapists, then that's a big issue. So you got to understand why society or why they themselves became this way, why they became so dangerous. So that's why when I talk about what happens when people become dangerous to themselves and others, it's important because in one hand you have men who become serial rapists, and then you have women who also are perpetrators against children. So see, that's the whole gist of it, is that if both parties do not try to heal, they will become perpetrators. And the vast majority of people who do this have this history within relationships with the people they've had children with, or just relationships with other men or other women. So it becomes really entrenched, this lateral violence, this control, this gaslighting, all this need for dominance is played out in their behavior. So that's why for me, I'm old enough that I just don't care anymore. I just don't care if people think I'm a pedophile, or they think I've raped boys or teenagers, or if I've chased after Nathan Chasing Horse, sending him love emails, that if I've hunted him down at every powwow, that I've saved money to go see him being sentenced, bless his heart. Really, everything and anything despicable and being deprived has been projected onto me. So, my podcast and what I do and how I say things, I'm not excusing people for thinking bad about me. That's just their human nature. That's why I say they're a danger to themselves and others, because they don't have the capacity to realize, like, this is their behavior. This is how they're going to live the rest of their lives. And again, I hear a comment, oh, some people shouldn't be mothers. I know an elder woman, women can be really bad women, like bad spouses, bad moms. But there's always this hope that, okay, I'm not going to hit my child. I'm not going to abuse my child. I'm going to help my child thrive. But at the same time, too, you're giving the child permission to make mistakes. Some people just don't want their child to make mistakes, or when the child makes mistakes, they don't realize the child has capability of doing much worse, and probably has, and been caught this one time when maybe 7 other times they haven't been caught. So this elder woman, I was driving with my late mother, and I saw this car in front of us swerving. This was in the city, swerving, and the car swerved off onto the walkway, and then swerved back onto the highway, and then back and forth. And I thought, this person must be intoxicated. So I was weary. I drove cautiously around the car as to avoid being hit. And I looked in and I saw this elderly woman. And what she was doing, she was punching her daughter in the face, in her daughter's face, while she was driving. And this daughter, I think she's passed away now, but this daughter has a daughter who is very, very like she's an activist, but in like she doesn't care. She has followers, social media, and yet so bitter and vindictive and hateful to people. In my community, I just have to say her name, and already there's a chill that goes down people's spines. Like stuff like that. I'm just grateful that when I do talk to certain Tsuut'ina people, especially men, that they're being quite open and honest about how they see other people. And like I said, a large amount of time I don't really know, like the children under the age of 20. And like I said to this group, I said, somebody adopt me so at least you'll know who I am. Jokingly, of course. But I just wanted to put it out there that with all this controversy, with the lawsuit, with the Recovery Center, with just people hurting, wanting to hurt people, people wanting to have their voice. And in some ways, maybe people see me this way in my podcast, but that's not the intention of why I do what I do. I do talk about my life, and I try to say, well, this is what I learned. And even trying to just help other people. I mean, like I have my uncle's granddaughter. She's a mom. I think her son is 17. Is in a very violent relationship. The thing though is that she's the one who beats up her partner, not the other way around. So again, why do couples do that? Why do they have so much? Why do they want to have so much control and such a need to be turned on by hurting their partner? That to me, like the addiction to inflict pain on somebody, for I don't know, sexual gratification. So all this I think it has to, like, I've never wanted to be a social worker or a therapist, because I think about 70% of the clients are having to do with marriage counseling. So no, that's not. I've never wanted to do that, and I hope my podcast isn't about that. It's just about different ways of healing and different ways of knowing things, and for people to understand, like, we're so diverse as Indigenous people. Like, one Tsuut'ina isn't the same as Siksika. We're not the same as the Stonies or the Cree. We're a unique community, and it's the same way too with other different fractions within the United States. We've all grown up in different environments, and sometimes we have a common cause, especially when you have billionaires or millionaires spending money to promote their own ideology, their own religion, all for the sake of conversion and making, having control over another person, or having themselves feel like they're Puritans, and like their beliefs are the most valuable and the unique, and that they really need to do the Christian thing, when really, who are they hurting? They need to self-reflect and look at their own homes. That's why, for me, when I made a comment to my white friend about, to stop drinking for 6 months to see if that helps in improving her cholesterol. But, you know, if she's upset at me, what can I say? You know, a lot of things people don't want to hear because they'd sooner look at me as an Indigenous woman and say, well, no, you have problems. We all have problems. But I, you know, we were having a conversation. This is what developed. But it's like that with every human being. I mean, I do that all the time. I'm not perfect, far from it. Most likely the lady who wrote the email is so upset at me. Again, I don't even know her, okay? It's just my how I think and how I process things. Because, you know, life is there's so many people who just want to hurt people. And the majority of times when you have white supremacists who are stuffing their pockets with indigenous money, especially the most vulnerable women and children, it's upsetting. And even I forget. I was talking to a friend of mine. I said, yeah, those 27 pages that the accountant had, the money trail of monies that were coming in, like when you talk about the signing of the contract for 35 million, 100,000 coming in prior, like all this stuff. There's a paper trail, and my friend did say, well, Marina, the Globe and Mail wouldn't have published it unless they had their lawyers, and even with the Fifth Estate too, when they did the documentary, they had lawyers. So everything and anything they did was all legal. That's why when I get an email, when I get not an email, but a comment on my YouTube about leadership, I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. You know, wait a minute, hold on here. You know, it's like, again, you know, like my aunt talks about treaty, and yet, you know, where's her war chest? You know, she's fighting against the old monarchy, against thousands of, they have so much money to have lawyers, especially when it comes to our treaty rights. You know, and again, you know, people are welcome to criticize and say whatever they want to say. If they want to be slanderous, they can do that. But really, you know, it boggles my mind that in today's generation that people can just blatantly put stuff on my YouTube channel, not realizing that if people wanted to sue, like to find out who is slandering so and so, because she was quite literally naming names, that anybody, you know, could trace her web address. Like, it's, technology is so much different from the 70s. Okay, and even the literacy, like the computer literacy, is so far more sophisticated. Why the hell do you think they're building data centers all over the damn place? Anyway, I hope you look after yourself. It's like I said, I can barely see the trees across the road here. And like I'm boiling water just to get humidity in my house. I've got my air purifier on. I'm not putting my air conditioner on until it gets in the 30s. But other than that, I just wanted to, I wanted people to have some insight that when you start calling people pedophiles or rapists, you really have to understand that if you're just looking at the surface, like if these people are in their 40s or 50s, do you have the capacity to understand that where they started would have been when they were teenagers? That's why when you grow up with people, you grow up with them from childhood throughout your whole life. You're around them. You know how they've behaved your whole life. And that's why, like, when I started to understand Nathan Chasing Horse, because he's Sioux. There's a certain way Sioux people are raised. And to know that he ran away and that nobody in his community even could, you know, observe his behavior. Like I said, I've got, there are men here who've passed away, who've had more than 10 children. You know, one was a serial rapist and the other one wasn't. But again, the behavior had to have started someplace, and it usually started when they were teenagers. And again, for me as an elder, when I do walk around in my community and I have men who are my age who greet me with respect, that tells me a lot. And then you have young men who look at me like, who the hell do you think you are? That also tells me a lot. So I just wanted to put it out there that, you know, if you think it's easy to prosecute somebody who allegedly has sexually assaulted anybody, you have to really have everything in place. You have to really fight. Like, that's why, like, for me, I didn't understand it. I had a support group. I didn't know how long my fight was going to take. I didn't know who was going to be my supporters. Didn't know all that. I just knew I had to do it. But that's the point that I'm getting at, is that when you're up against powerful people who are protecting their brother, their nephew, their cousin, whoever, or even their dad, you know, like, that's who you're facing. That's who's going to have resentment towards you forever. I mean, forever. You know, because they're so angry that their relative has this behavior. That's why I'm talking about there's a certain acceptance of how people behave when it comes to healthy human sexuality. But when you try to put blame onto victims, you're not really looking at the whole spectrum within your own life, your own family, your own community, and the influence that a perpetrator has had within that structure. So again, you know, it's one thing to stand up and advocate for justice, but it's another thing to actually go through the whole process of getting somebody behind bars, to get somebody, for the legal system to say, yes, they've hurt people. It's a lot harder than just gossip or merely writing a nasty email or putting it out on Facebook someplace. Like understand, I know some people have been struggling to prosecute certain people for decades, but it's not even them who are victims. They're doing this because of hearsay. And to me, that is an issue. For me, my advocacy has always just been for myself. You may think that I'm selfish, but for me, when I say to survivors, you have to find the courage yourself to do it. And you have to have a support system. Now, I was very fortunate that Sierra and Lynette, that I met them and gave them star blankets, because Lynette's father, or I'm sorry, Lynette's daughter needed her support. And so even that, having to spread out, like, to also get all those other people supporting them, it was an effort, like 14 years. Like I'm saying, this isn't an easy thing that you do when you're trying to get justice for yourself. But you have to own it, and you have to stand, and you have to have courage to do it. This whole I think lateral violence of women taking up the cause because of hearsay, or they've seen the woman go into a hotel room with so and so. You know, I'm going, no, you have to talk to the individual. You have to not just have assumptions that, you know, that this must have happened, unless the victim, alleged victim, actually wants to do something. Then if she approaches you and says, can you support me? Then you can step in. But for individuals to just go and write stuff on Facebook or put it on my YouTube comments, I'm going, oh my goodness. Like, be an adult. Grow some cojones. I've met so many strong indigenous women, like, you know, really, the tenacity of Indigenous women to seek justice is overwhelming. And I just really am grateful that I have this network of friends from across Canada that I've managed to maintain friends with, and have worked hard in establishing that. And I'm grateful too that if people out there who listen to my podcast or have commented to me or have met me and still remain my friends, then that's good. Like, because I can't ask for anything anymore. And the reality of it is, because it's a cultural, because of my culture, no matter how much a white person wants to even have an inkling of what it's like, you cannot do that if you are going to come in there as a therapist or a social worker or someone who has this preconceived notion of helping Indigenous people, because you really have to be able to take the criticism also. And when that challenge isn't met, then that's not my problem. Because like when it's my time to leave this earth, I will have met, and there'll be people who I've known for decades and decades. So whatever I can do to help encourage both boys and girls, young men and young women who have been victims of sexual violence, to come forward. I'm just saying it's not easy. It's something that you'll struggle with, and that memory, it will always be with you, and how you handle it and how you carry it and how you use it to help other people is important, because it's fear-based, and to find the courage to face your fear is the greatest blessing that you can give to yourself. So that being said, if I've hurt anybody's feelings because of the way I say and try to put boundaries down about how I see a victim, or how people don't want to listen and try to twist my words around, that comes with the territory of having a narrative. That comes with anything when you have a voice. Have a good day, and probably we'll create another podcast tomorrow, because what else can I do? I'm just staying home, trying to survive and not get sick and a heart attack or whatever. But oh my goodness, stay safe, stay alive, and try to enjoy yourself, even if you have to stay indoors because of this heat and smoke.